Hello and good evening. It is October 1st, 2010, and you are watching Debate Night live here on ABN. Hi, I'm Brother Chris. I'm excited to bring to you another program. Brand new month, end of a week, start of a new month. Exciting times going on here at ABN in the middle of our fundraiser, as a matter of fact. Glad that you're tuning in. You're watching us either on the internet or on our digital satellite network. And anyone can tune in anytime at www.abnsat.com. We will be taking your calls a little bit later. But right now we're going to start to talk to you a little bit about the program tonight, which is, again, Debate Night. The topic tonight itself is Does Islam Violate Basic Human Rights? And we have two apologists here tonight, a Muslim and also a Christian apologist. And we'll introduce them right now and talk a little bit about what they represent and a little bit about their background. The first is our Muslim apologist. His name is Sami Zaatari, and he has been an apologist for the past 5 years. He runs his own site called Muslim-responses.com, and he has debated publicly, both in the U.S. and the U.K., with Christians such as David Wood, Nabil Qureshi, and James White, people that we know here. Also Jay Smith, and he is currently doing his master's in the Middle East and politics. Sammy, can you give us a shout out tonight?
Yeah, hi, how are you? And thank you for having me on the show tonight.
Great, doing well, and good to hear you, and thanks for asking. And we look forward to a great program tonight here for the next 90 minutes or so as we get into this. I would like to now introduce our Christian apologist. His name is Reverend Tony Costa. Tony's been on our program a number of times before. Talk a little bit about Tony. He has earned a BA and an MA in the study of religion from the University of Toronto. He is currently a PhD candidate at Radboud University in the Netherlands and in New Testament studies. Tony is also a member of the Society of Biblical Literature and Evangelical Philosophical Society. His area of expertise is biblical and systematic theology, cults, the New Age movement, and comparative world religions. Tony is also an adjunct professor of Christian apologetics with the Toronto Baptist Seminary. In addition, Tony is also an ordained minister. And as a Christian apologist, Reverend Tony Costa gives reasons for the valid belief in Christianity and also advocates the unique claims of Jesus Christ. Tony, are you with us tonight?
Yes, I am, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight, Chris.
Great to see you. Thanks for saying so, and we're looking forward to a great program. So at this point, just to walk through this for the audience here, if you've not seen our program, or if you have, just to recap, we will be on the air, live on the internet between now and 9:30 or so. Maybe a little before 9:30 we'll finish for the program. We'll eventually here give the Christian and Muslim apologists each their 5 minutes opening statement, followed by the respective 5-minute rebuttals. We have a couple of announcements before we go to our first break. The break will be short. Once we get back, we'll be in our second segment. We'll have what's called a crossfire, and each of the gentlemen here will have an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes. And then we give them two 2-minute segments. And then we have a 5-minute closing statement by both our Muslim and Christian apologists. And then we make a few more announcements. At that point, we can start taking your calls. And we'll be mentioning that to you as we get back from the first break. We will go to our second break once we come back from that. The entire last 25 minutes will be of our phone calls. So stay tuned and be ready to make your calls. And call the number at 248-416-1300 when we let you know about that. By the way, I did mention we are in the middle of our fundraiser. And then, yes, indeed, if you've watched our shows, you know that the facility here and the equipment that we have and our techs all require, yes, indeed, they require funds. So we, as the Lord leads, we pray that you consider donating to our ministry here at ABN. You can go to our website anytime at www.abnsat.com. Or again, you can call us at 248-416-1300. Operators are standing by, as is said, often for these types of programs. But we do indeed are grateful for your viewership, and we certainly would love to hear from you tonight, either as a call-in on the show for a question for either a Christian or Muslim apologist, or certainly to donate at any time. So just wanted to make sure, we'll be reminding you as well as we get through the program. Okay, at this point, Sammy, if you're ready, we have our clock set for 5 minutes. And if you are ready to go, you can go ahead and start with your 5-minute opening statement.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the topic for tonight's debate is the following. Does Islam violate basic human rights? Now, we already have an issue starting from now. Now, since I'm on the defensive, my position tonight is to show that Islam doesn't violate basic human rights, and my opponent will be attacking that and trying to show that it does violate basic human rights. But now here's the fundamental question that we all have to ask. What is basic human rights? Now, it is my opponent who will have to define what these basic human rights are, and then he's going to have to attack Islam from there. I'm not going to be making the rules. Now, is my opponent going to define basic human rights as his own personal objective? I don't think he will, because that isn't a strong case. Will he be using the Bible? Or number three, will he be using a secular, non-religious text, such as the UN's Declaration of Human Rights? Now, if my opponent decides to use the UN Declaration of Human Rights, he will be very inconsistent for doing so, for a number of reasons. For starters, my opponent is a Christian reverend, and this is a Christian broadcasting network. So therefore, my opponent has to be consistent with his own Christian belief. As I repeat, after all, we're on a Christian broadcasting channel. Now, if he uses the Declaration of Human Rights by the UN, this would also contradict his very own Bible. Therefore, he will be being inconsistent. And as Dr. James White says, I'm sure you all know who Dr. James White is. He is a guest on this channel, and he constantly says inconsistency is the sign of a failed argument. So if my opponent quotes the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a secular charter, that contradicts his very own Bible, therefore he shall be inconsistent and thereby debunking his own position. I'm going to repeatedly tonight follow my opponent and demand consistency. I will ask my opponent that if he wants to attack Islam for supposedly going against basic human rights, first of all, he will have to come up with a definition that isn't inconsistent and that doesn't go against his own belief. I can't emphasize that point enough. We're not debating on CNN or some public university. We are debating on a Christian TV network. Therefore, you must be consistent with your own Christian and biblical traditions. So basically, what I'm asking you to do is come up with a proper response of what basic human rights is. And for now, I can't really say much about Islam and human rights because you have yet to define it for me. So with that, I'm going to end my case right now, and I'll have much more to say when you can tell me what basic human rights is. And with that, I close.
Okay, Sammy, you have a minute and a half left, but if you wish to move on, that's okay. We'll allow this time Reverend Tony Costa. We're resetting the clock, and we will get that ready for you. And now you can start your opening statement at this point, Reverend Costa.
I define human rights as that which is ultimately grounded in the God of Scripture. God is the foundation of all morality and all human dignity and integrity. And therefore, since humans bear the divine image of God, they have those rights. Now, those rights have been expressed in various documents and legal documents. I'm not just going to refer to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. These rights that we call basic are rights that have to do with the freedom of religion. They have to do with the freedom of expression. They have to do with the freedom of the press. They have to do with freedom of assembly. These rights are recognized in the U.S. Bill of Rights. It's recognized in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. And these rights are considered to be based on the Creator. In the U.S. Constitution, they hold these things to be these rights that are given to people to be founded on God. They're endowed by the Creator. I'm from Canada, and in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it begins that we recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So these human rights are based on ultimately the person of God himself. And humans, being made in the image of God, have these rights intrinsic to them. Now, I'm going to argue, since Sami has not defined human rights at all, which seems to imply there are no human rights in Islam. I would argue that Islam does violate the most basic human rights that we cherish and that we hold dearly, and which we permit people like Sami to have in Western civilization. The number of issues that conflict in Islam with basic human rights have to do with things like religious discrimination, for instance, the treatment of non-Muslims, for instance, the dhimmis, those who are subdued and subjugated people, the humiliated people. For instance, in Surah 9, it calls upon Muslims to impose a poll tax, the jizya, on the Ahl Kitab, the Jews and the Christians. We have, for instance, in the Hadith, Muhammad orders the expulsion of all Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. We have the Pact of Omar that he entered into with the Christians in Syria, where he made conditions that Christians were prohibited from building monasteries and churches, and even repairing churches that had been destroyed. Another issue is that of religious freedom. The UN Declaration of Human Rights says that people not only have the right to choose the religion, they have the right to change the religion. However, in Islam, it's very clear that you cannot leave your religion and live. The apostate must be put to death. This is made very clear in Sahih al-Bukhari in volume 4 and number 260. The Prophet said, if anybody that is a Muslim discards his religion, kill him. There's also the sense of inequality. Non-Muslims in the Bible are, for instance, in Surah 98, verse 6, the Jews and the Christians and idolaters are called the worst of created beings, whereas in Surah 98 and verse 7, the Muslims are called the best of created beings. So there you have an inequality that is being presented within the Quran itself. In Surah 5 and verse 51, Muslims are told not to make friends of Jews and Christians, for they're only friends to each other. Another freedom that we cherish as well, we're talking about basic human rights here, fundamental human rights. And I think that Sami would agree with me that the freedom of speech is also a fundamental right. He would not be allowed to be on this Christian broadcasting studio today if it were not for the principle of freedom of speech and expression. We know from the Muslim sources that Muhammad had people killed who dared to mock him and to attack his person and to attack him in their writings or in their poetry. It's a fact that he called upon Muslims to execute such people. We have modern-day examples of Salman Rushdie, who still lives undercover for fear of his life since the Ayatollah Khomeini issued his fatwa because of his book that he wrote on the satanic verses, wherein he demeaned the Prophet Muhammad. We also know of Theo Van Gogh and how he was murdered because of a film that he had produced on the discrimination or the abuse of women. We also know that in Pakistan we have the famous blasphemy law, section 295-C, where we are told that if anyone mocks Muhammad or says anything denigrating the Prophet Muhammad, he is to be put to death. We also have the issue of slavery, which is condoned in the Quran. Sex with slaves. Muslims are allowed to engage in sexual intercourse with those whom their right hand possesses. And of course, we have the issue of women's rights. The Quran is very clear that a husband has the right to beat his wife, and that women are considered, the testimony of women is that half of a man. Sorry, Chris, I just didn't hear you there. My time is up?
Yeah, you just finished.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, we now have 5 minutes for each of you to have a rebuttal. And at this point, Sami, if you're ready, you have 5 minutes. You can start right now.
Okay, thank you. There are a lot of points. So you define basic human rights. One of your definition was freedom of religion. Well, this is very interesting because Islam indeed does grant you freedom of religion. In Surah 2, verse 256, the Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. In fact, there's an entire chapter of the Quran, Surah 109, chapter 109, which is all about tolerance. You have your way, I have mine. You won't come to my way,